gonna be on you. It's probably more appropriate to be on the comedy channel or something. But anyways, Stephanie, Alice, Susan, thank you very much for this opportunity. So you just don't volunteer for these and show up and do it, right? There's an interrogation process that you have to go through. I felt like I was trying to get back into going back into the FBI. The process I went through to get selected to be an agent in the FBI over here at Blossoms, they filled me up with liquor, but anyway, here I am. And so I don't know what's more surprising, that there's this many people here, or you had to pay to get in. Right? I mean, so hear me, right? I do it for free. In fact, I am doing it for free. But I want to thank you for attending, right? So this is not my wheelhouse, public speaking, right? And I have this, and I'll get into the presentation here in just a moment. The biggest thing about this, I fear about this presentation is the technology. And I'll explain this slide to you in a few minutes, because I got some video in here, and I really want you to see the video. So hopefully everything works. I've changed these slides at least 30 times in the last week. Because I want to make it interesting, right? Because we know what happened in Boston, we know the end state, right? But I want to provide you some information that you may not have heard if you watched the movie or you read the papers, right? Some anecdotes, right? I have a great sense of humor, and I'll make fun of myself, and I'll make fun of myself in this presentation. But there's some serious portions of this presentation as well when we get into the Boston bombing, because there were a lot of people hurt. And so I've given many presentations in the past, right? I don't think I've ever done a group this large before, but I break them up in thirds, right? So the front third, the front of this audience right here, what I'm looking at front, they're really interested. They want to be here. They want to hear what I have to say. I got family here. They don't, right? So if you see them laughing and clapping and standing ovation, they have to. Okay. So the middle portion of this group, you're kind of interested. You're just not really sure, right, what this is all about, right? But we'll come, we'll see what it's about. But the people in the back sitting by the exit, they think this is an FBI sting, and they're going to unmask this place out the back when the guys come in with their SWAT gear. Some of you have some pretty sketchy backgrounds. In fact, I don't know how some of you got in here, right? Anyway, like I said, I have a great sense of humor. I do 2 shows on the weekend, so if you can go to them. And I have notes up here. So if you see me pause, don't feel sorry for me. I'm just trying to get my thoughts together. There'll be pauses, right? I may be trying to think of a sentence that has, or a word that has more than 2 syllables in it or something. But there'll be pauses, right? Let's see here. So the presentation is really broken up into 3 areas, right? Although it's titled the Boston bombing. But like I said, we all know what happened in Boston, right? We know, the older brother was killed, and the younger brother now is out Supermax, right? So I've broken this up into 3 areas, right? I talk about my journey. How did a guy from a small town in Indiana marry a girl from a small town in Indiana? Both get into the FBI, get into Washington, D.C., and work some of the cases that we work. So my journey to the FBI, my journey to the Boston bombing, how I got there. And then, my career in the field offices that I was assigned to. So I've kind of broken it up into the 3 areas. So now I'll go back and forth. I'll go from one slide to the next. It's just the way I speak, and I stay on track. Ask any question anytime. Don't wait to the end. I don't care what it's about, right? Anything about the FBI, anything you've heard, and I can confirm or deny, I'll do it. But I always get this question, always. We don't do UFOs, right? There is not a squad in any field office or FBI headquarters that investigates UFOs. And how do I know that? Because if we had UFOs and aliens, that would be a national security event, right? And I work national security. And I would have known as an FBI headquarters, hey, we got this UFO down in Veranda. We need to send the Miami office of Tampa, someone from the Tampa office to go down there and interview some people, right? So we don't do UFOs. So I'll start that up front. Any other question? Jimmy Hoffa, got it. But feel free to ask. Okay. Made that one. I gotta do that slide. So let me just kind of describe this slide to you real quick, right? So you see it on there. It is titled Communications in a Crisis, SAC Bob Holley. SAC stands for Special Agent in Charge, right? So I ran as the agent in charge of the Chicago field office. I also ran the Indianapolis field office for a short period of time, and I'll get into that here in a little bit. And I gave this presentation initially in late 2013. After the Boston bombing in April, I eventually got selected to lead the Chicago field office and left in November of 13. But we were asked by the individuals. You see the flags in the upper left-hand corner, right? We got Canada, we got the UK, we got New Zealand, and we have Australia. Other than the countries depicted by those flags, what do those 5 countries depict? And anybody answer that question? 5 right there. I got something for you, sir. And I knew it was going to be you, right? I'll explain what the 5 are. Any questions? So that's not a plant. That is actually the right. I used to see him in the gym in the mornings, what, 4:30, somewhere in there, right? But we all use the same equipment, right? So you're kind of standing around. So I go in at 3 a.m. now. So I'm waiting for someone to come in at 3 a.m. and I'll start showing up at 2 a.m. Right? So we'll turn this into a competition, right? So, but anyway. So the 5 Eyes are our closest partners, and this program was developed after World War II. And essentially what the 5 Eye does for you, when I say 5 Eyes like this, right, is it facilitates the sharing of intelligence. So the intelligence sharing process, once we collect intelligence, when I say we, I'm talking about the intelligence community, which is made up of like 14 different agencies in the United States. The ones you hear the most of, NSA, CIA, Department of Defense, and the FBI. But there's a bunch of others, right? And then so as we collect intelligence, you name it, whether it's a terrorism event or some other type of national security event, we can share that information, but it's really just almost giving it to them, right? I mean, there's a process we go through, but you don't have to go through where you're vetting another country to share this information for. So in the terrorism arena where I worked, it was a great way to share information very, very quick. They have great partners. I've done terrorism cases with every one of our 5 Eye partners. And I'll mention a case that started in Chicago, was based on a phone number that came from our British friends, right? So I didn't want to change the slides. So I just want to kind of put it in context where I'm coming from. A lot of the slides are still the same that I used back then. And I've just updated a couple of things to put in here for this audience. Like I said, I've done this presentation multiple times. I do it to a high school in Deerfield, or no, it's actually Highland Park. I just met a guy from Highland Park right there, the high school there. They have a criminal forensics class. I go there and talk about forensics and stuff like that. But very, very, I love doing this. I consider myself a self-appointed ambassador for the FBI. The more I can get out there by the FBI, about the FBI, and dispel rumors or clear things up, and I'll recruit. Right, I'm trying to recruit a nephew. I've been giving him coins and stuff for years, and he's interested in the FBI. A couple of people I recruited couldn't get past the background, so I mean that's not a reflection on me. It's just reflection on bad choices that they made. And so I'm getting to the point here in a minute. So last week, or 2 weeks ago, Ken was in the audience. He said he was going to come. I came to his, he was going to come to mine. He didn't show up. Okay. And then last year I saw Chris. Chris, I'm gonna butcher your last name. I apologize. Johannesson. Where he's a missileer. He's an officer of the United States Air Force. And so if you look at the presentation I'm going to give, the one that Ken gave last week, and the one that Chris gave last year, we kind of dovetail one another. We're all about protecting democracy and defending our country, right? Now, Chris has got more power than any of us, right? And he's pushing the button for nuclear, stuff, right? And so if you haven't seen his presentation, Chris, I hope you do give it again, because I would come again. It was great. I grew up, you'll see in a minute, I grew up in the Air Force. And so I have a lot of respect for my Air Force colleagues. My good friend Bill Woolman here, C-17 pilot. He should be up here giving a presentation. But he kind of defected from the Army, right? He was in the old guard in the Army. He decided to go to the Air Force. I don't know why he did that, Bill, but
Better food.
better food, yeah, better accommodations. But anyway, those are tough acts to follow. They really are, right? And so I hope to be half as good as they are in this presentation. And again, please, if you have any questions, please ask. Oh, I do got to recognize someone else, and it's not a plant. Gary Kissinger, right back there. Gary and I worked in the Chicago office, retired FBI. So, Gary, did you see this? No, it's on the first slide. You saw SAC, right? And then I know when I got named SAC Chicago, you go, my God, is he the only one to put in for it? Right? So, he's not a plant. Gary's retired FBI, and I was very surprised when I saw him coming. All right, here comes. So I got the agenda up there. We're going to try and follow it. I can't say that I will, but we're going to try and follow it to the best I can. My intent is to keep this to an hour. Anything longer than that, you're going to get bored, and you're going to get up, you're going to get very, you're going to leave, right? And I don't want to bore you, right? So we'll get to the slides. Like I said, ask the questions down. There's a question slide at the end if you want to ask questions, but please, no need to wait. Okay, who am I, right? So, where do I come from and how did I get to the FBI? So I grew up in the Air Force, like I said. I was born in Plattsburgh Air Force Base, New York. My dad was career Air Force, and when he retired from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, my dad was a Hoosier. He was from Indiana, and he was from South Bend. And when he retired, we moved to Peru, Indiana, out just outside Grissom Air Force Base in the central part of the state. So I call Indiana home. Although like some of my dad's career, I lived in England, I lived in New York, I lived in Guam, I lived in Missouri, but I was, my dad retired in Peru, Indiana. Like I said, I call Indiana home. I consider myself a Hoosier. Any other Hoosiers in here? All right, yeah, go Ball State, right? So that's where I went to school, Ball State. Folks that can't get into Ball State go to IU, Purdue, Notre Dame, right? So, and most people consider Ball State the Harvard of the Midwest. I mean, any Ball Staters? Yeah, I didn't think so. So I was fucking this other than my wife. Yeah. So that's where I met my wife. I was stalked, right? When I was a senior, she was a junior. She stalked me, and finally I relented. And our first date was supposed to be a Bruce Springsteen concert, but he got canceled. But here we are. We've been married 42 years, so I've clearly outkicked my coverage, as I like to say. My wife is where I had 20 years in the FBI, my wife had 27. So a few years after I graduated, I decided to join the Army, right? But when I went down to see the retreater, I knew I didn't want to be enlisted. My dad was enlisted. My dad was retired Master Sergeant. But I had many friends whose dads were officers. And the officer side versus the enlisted side, there's a big difference. I don't know if there's any former military in here. So
better food.
Yeah, better food, pays a little bit better. And so I went to officers candidate school and joined the Army. Became an infantry officer. A couple of tours at Fort Benning, Georgia, all the schoolhouse. I did my lieutenant time at Fort Knox, Kentucky, which is an armor post, believe it or not. I was an infantry guy. I commanded a light infantry company out in Fort Worth, California. Then I went to the National Training Center. From there, so I spent just over 9 years in the Army. And then we decided to join the FBI. I guess before I decided to join the FBI. So my wife didn't want to leave the Army. And so I joined the FBI, went through the process to get selection. And the challenge for me was the age range to become an FBI agent is 23 to 37, right? So you got to be in that range. The average age is about 28 to get selected. And most don't get selected on their first time, unless you have some really a significant skill set the FBI is looking for. It could be a language, it could be computer science, it could be attorney. But most, it takes a couple times to try, and it's a long process, right? So this is the day I graduated from the FBI Academy. Louis Free was the director then, provided me my credentials. And then I got assigned to the Chicago field office as a brand new agent. This is my retirement photo. Mandatory retirement for agents is 57 years old. And so I hit 57, I got asked to leave, right? And this is a picture of my wife and my son. At my retirement ceremony back in August of 2015. So for all you math majors out there, I'm 67 years old, right? So, I am still really connected to the Chicago field office. In fact, there's the guy that's the special agent in charge right now was the supervisor for me when I was a special agent in charge. And I was actually at FBI headquarters last week, meeting with some former colleagues. So I stay in touch. I still have FBI credentials, right? So when you retire, they take your FBI credentials and they put retired on it, right? I still have my badge. And so, what does this do for you? Not a whole lot. It still gets you out of traffic tickets. You say, when I was an agent, active duty agent, you get pulled over and you say, hey, I got a weapon on me, right? And they say, well, why do you have a weapon? You go, hey, and then you get professional courtesy, they call it, you get let go. Now, because I don't carry a weapon. And I just say, hey, is this going to help you? And it normally does, yes.
Why 57? That seems so young.
Yeah, well, thank you. 67 even looks younger, right? Yeah. It's so armed law enforcement officers in the federal government were called 1811s, right? So for all 1811s, federal law enforcement mandatory retirement in 57. It's a congressional thing. It has something to do with pensions and everything. I don't know. Because had they extended, I would have stayed. Absolutely would have stayed. I love what I was doing. Now the director of the FBI can extend you yearly till you're 60, right? But every year you got to go through that process, and every year you're not as desirable to the private sector, right? And so when I hit 57 on August 7th, I had to be gone by the last day of August. And so it happens, I had a former FBI colleague that I worked for was retired, and he hired me. Discovered I'll get in that in a minute, right? Yeah, but I think most agents retire when they hit 50. You have to have at least 20 years in and be 50 years of age to retire. And a fair amount of them go to 50 because now they have kids in college. The federal government, my job in the bureau was great, and the pay ain't great, right? And so, most, like I say, mostly to 50. Good question. Yes, sir.
I have read some. When we applied for the state we 40 and we one.
Okay. Very good question. I got something for your grandson when we're done, all right, for how to get in the FBI, right? So a new agents class in Quantico is about 50 students. And the last statistics I saw, about 30% of a class of 50 is made up of former law enforcement or current law enforcement or military. That's how I got in, right? I was an infantry guy. My skill set is pretty limited, right? I was trained to hit, put it bluntly. But I went through some great leadership schools in the Bureau, and that's how I got hired. And plus, the Bureau hadn't hired in like 5 years, and they were trying to fill seats in the academy. So I was very, very lucky, very, very fortunate. But I have something for you to give your grandson. That's our dog, Buddy. Right. So if you see us walking around, that's him. He's as friendly, is to be able to Bill and Holley know him very well. So we do a lot of walking. He's not good around the dogs so much, so if we're walking across the street from you, it's not you. We like you, he likes you, it's just we're not so sure about the dogs like you. Huh? My hobbies, I love to fish. I don't do it very often, but I love to fish. So this, I got into musky fishing. Any musky fishermen in here? Oh yeah, there you go. So once you catch the first one, you're hooked, right? So I caught that one up in Canada this last year. So I like to fish. I don't fish as much. I don't 4 or 5 times a year. So this last year I was up in Canada with northern Wisconsin, Minocqua. I did a trip to Alaska, and then behind my house. I can catch large amount bass out there. Fran turned me on to that, fishing there. So I get out a couple times, a year here in Veranga. I love to hike. So I hiked the Grand Canyon several times. This is something my son and I get to do together. The hiking down here is kind of limited, it's pretty flat. But you get a lot of miles in here, right? And so I did the Grand Canyon in 24. And I did all my training here, right? And but it's time on your feet. And then I love to mountain bike. Can't do a lot of mountain biking here either. You get a lot of miles in. So I'm usually out early in the morning riding my bike. And so, those are my hobbies. My wife would tell you my hobbies work, so they still work. But these are things I like to do from time to time. And I currently work, when I retired, I went to work for Discover Financial Services, your Discover credit card, right? So all of you that have Discover credit card, anybody got them? Okay, please run those up to the limit. You just pay the minimum, right? And we were acquired by Capital One. It was approved. The merger was approved in May, so I now work for Capital One. So I will stay with them for a little bit, see what happens until I decide what I'm going to do with my life. Okay, let's get into my FBI career. Like I said, I became an agent in 1995. I got my credentials, and I was assigned to the Chicago field office. This is what you see on the upper left-hand corner is actually the new office that they moved into 2005 or 6. But when I started in Chicago, it was anybody familiar with Chicago, down Derrick One and Jackson, downtown, with the U.S. Attorney's Office in the federal courthouse. So I had the pleasure to start my career there and end my career there. And I had, as it started as a new agent, and I had every management position available to a field office agents for individuals who decide to get into management. I was a squad supervisor. I became an ESAC, which is an assistant special agent in charge, where I was in charge of the counterterrorism branch. And then, as I said, I retired as the special agent in charge. I did 3 separate tours at FBI headquarters in the counterterrorism division. And you see that in the bottom left, but I also have Liberty Crossing. Liberty Crossing is where the FBI's counterterrorism operations center is, and it's located in McLean, Virginia. If you're familiar with McLean or Tyson Corner area, that's where the counterterrorism operations center is. Like I said, I did 3 tours there, and each subsequent tour, I got promoted, right? And it was from FBI headquarters. I'll get that in a minute when we get to the Boston bombing, of how I got from FBI headquarters up to the Boston bombing. And being a Hoosier, being from Indiana, I was selected to be the special agent in charge of the Indianapolis field office. Anybody from Indianapolis? Great. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's over by Castleton. So I wasn't there very long. My wife was still up in Chicago. We had moved her down. Her son just started college, right? I think. Yeah, high school. And so she had moved down to, we'd been looking, and then I got that dreaded call from Director Mueller. And so I got a call, and Director Mueller was very dry. He had 0 sense of humor. And he goes, Bob Mueller here, and he goes, he asked me, how long have you been in Indianapolis? I got there in October of 2012. And so this call was in May of 13. No, I got there in 2000. The dates don't matter. I was there 5 months. And I got a call. I got put back at FBI headquarters. I wanted to retire out of Indianapolis. I was home. Both of our parents were still alive. It was a brand new building. It was just great. Indiana is just such a great state. I'm a little bit biased, but it is a great state. As the SAC, I was responsible for the whole state, in terms of FBI investigation. It was just a great time. But I didn't last there very long, and got pulled back, to FBI. So now a little bit about my career. Where have I been? What have I done? Right. So these are some of the terrorism deployments and some of the cases I've been involved in. So I deployed, with a team from Chicago, to Iraq, not long after the Iraqi war, the second Iraq war started, and I was embedded with a team, from JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command. And essentially, what we did, the JSOC groups, they were forward as they picked up people off the battlefield that weren't dead. They would interrogate them for tactical intelligence that they could act on. And then they would send them back where we were located, and we would do an FBI interview of those individuals for any more intelligence that we could get that would have effect on the homeland back here in the United States. So I spent about 90 days over there, in Iraq, doing those types of interrogations and investigations. The bottom, 1998, embassy bombings, Nairobi, Kenya, and Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. I actually went down there as part of a SWAT deployment. I was on the Chicago SWAT team. Went down there for a deployment, because I worked terrorism. I actually went over to Zanzibar to do some interviews of some Al Qaeda suspects. Anybody been to Zanzibar? About the Bob Hope movies. Yeah, and the road to Zanzibar, right? But anyway, so I spent some time, about 90 days there, internationally, conducting investigations over there. Aden, Yemen, USS Cole bombing, October of 2000. Al Qaeda suicide bombers in a boat rammed into the side of the USS Cole as it was downloading essentially trash and taking on provisions in Aden, Yemen. So I spent a little over a week, 10 days there, helping collect evidence. I was also a bomb technician for the FBI. So these were all before I got into management, right? So when you get into management, you got to give up your hobbies. So I was no longer on the SWAT. When I got into management, no longer on the SWAT team, no longer a bomb tech. So I was a bomb tech. I was actually in Uzbekistan at the time doing some training with some Uzbeks when the Cole got bombed and it got sent to USS Cole. And so this, you can, on the upper right, you see, where it was hit, right there about midship. And then what you see here is on a Blue Marlin. It was put on another ship and was sent back to Mississippi for repair. And then that's a picture of me. The reason I put that picture of me in there to prove that I was there. I used a ride service from around here, and I get a guy, I use the same ride service, they're great. I had a guy, he's a conspiracy theorist, right? And I have nothing, I love talking to him, he's a great guy, I love talking to him. But we got onto terrorism, and he asked me, hey, remember that ship that got blown up? I go, yeah. He goes, who do you think did that? Al Qaeda. He goes, oh no. He goes, was an AGI, it's all computer rated, that's all fake, didn't happen. He goes, I will show you on a picture, I can show you a line. And I go, well, I can show you a picture of me over there, right? I mean, you're gonna believe, right? He goes, I'll change my mind. I go, well, you're all wrong, right? And we didn't land on the moon. There's just stuff. He's a great guy. I love talking to him. He's extremely friendly. But the USS Cole. So some of these are local to Chicago, so I know you're from the Chicago area. This is David Coleman Headley. David Coleman Headley was, he did all the reconnaissance for the Mumbai attack. I think that was in 2008, if you remember when that happened. There was a lot of people killed, right? And there was a fair amount of U.S. citizens killed. And that's when the FBI gets involved. If U.S. citizens are subject to a terrorist attack overseas, we have extraterritorial squads that will fly over and conduct investigations over there in conjunction with our foreign counterparts. Headley came to our attention from a phone number. If you remember, I talked about the Five Eyes. The phone number was in contact with one of our Five Eye partners with one of their terrorism low-level subjects, right? So they send it to it goes to our FBI headquarters and send it to us in Chicago. So we take the number, we run with it, right? And we identified David Headley. We were actually looking at Headley because, he was planning, he's trying to put a team together to go over and kill the Danish cartoonists, right? This is when the cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad, were being distributed by this Danish cartoonist, and Headley was gonna go over there and defend, Islam, right? So David is a, American Pakistani national. His mom, US citizen, born here in the United States, and his dad was Pakistani. He actually looks kind of Eastern European there, right? So he got linked up with an individual with Al Qaeda named Ilyas Kashmir. Kashmir means nothing to you, but he was one of Bin Laden's Shura council members, a bad guy. So as we were looking at Headley for the Danish cartoonist bombing, we thought, man, this guy might have something to do with the Mumbai attacks. And come to find out, we did, right? Well, Headley, as we figured that out, Headley was getting ready to leave the country, go through Philadelphia. We just didn't have enough to do terrorism charges where we could arrest him and hold him, right? We had some charges, but he would probably bond it out right away, and he'd have been in the win. So our plan was, hey, let's bring him in, let's try and talk to him and see if he'll give it up, right? So we'll arrest him. And so as he was got through security at O'Hare, we were on the other side, we arrested him. Put him in a car, drove him down to the FBI office. Didn't say a word to him, right? And we put him in an investigative room, not a water board. We don't have that. That's a different agency, right? Same universe, different plan. And so we put him in a room, right, by himself. It was all cameraed up. And in this room, we had all these surveillance photos. This is a pretty quick investigation as it relates to the terrorism investigation. So this all happened within 3 or 4 months. So in this room, we have all these pictures of that. You know, our surveillance photos, and we have filing cabinets, and then we say Headley, Danish cartoonist, Headley, Mumbai, Headley, you know, the Taj Hotel, right? Nothing in the filing cabinets, just these titles. So folks, if you ever go into an FBI interrogation or investigation room and you see pictures of yourself in there, you're not leaving, right? Or they're gonna try to get you to waive your rights, and you know, it's not gonna end up well for you, right? So anyway, what we also did was, Headley, several years earlier, was a DEA source. He was helping them out on some drug cases. Because he could travel over internationally to Afghanistan and Pakistan with no problem. But the relationship soured, so the DEA cut him off, but we knew who his handler was. So while we had him in this room, we had his handler walk by and he saw him. So Headley's looking, he goes, oh no, they got me, I'm done. And so we go in there, we start interviewing him, and at some point you have to read him his Miranda rights. Once they start talking to you about, you're not gonna be free to leave, Miranda kicks in, and then your rights are, you have to invoke. You either have to say, yes, I will continue talking, or no, I need to see an attorney. If you say you need an attorney, you want to see my attorney, interview's over, right? Headley gave it all up. We gave him his Miranda rights. He says, no, I'm gonna talk. And we talked to him, he waived his rights every day for the next 14 days, right? He eventually, pled guilty, and he got some significant time. I don't know where he's located. It's not out of Supermax, but just a very, very interesting case. I mean, I can stand up here and give a presentation on this guy equally, right? I'll try to get through these quick because you're gonna, I don't want you guys to start getting bored. Khaled Al-Asari, Saudi student down at Texas Tech, was wanting to set off a IED in a bar. Right? How we got onto him, he was trying to order components from an individual that was an attendee at one of the FBI's Citizens Academy. I don't know if anybody's been invited to the Citizens Academy. It's where each field office will invite individuals within the community. You come in for like one day, one evening a day for 6 weeks, and you learn about the FBI. Well, he had been a member of the FBI's Citizens Academy and said, hey, this guy's ordering this stuff. This doesn't seem odd. Gave it to us. We took over the case. He got life, right? He obviously never got to the point where we're gonna let him set up his IED. But he was found guilty. Guy on the left, Edward Bachner, the fourth. He is from the suburbs of Chicago between Rockford and in Chicago. He was trying to kill his wife. And the way he was trying to kill his wife was there is a toxin in pufferfish. It's a neurotoxin that will, I guess kill you instantly. But he was trying to get the synthetic stuff. And he reached out to a provider that had it. I mean, I don't know why a provider would have it, use it, what they use it for. But that provider, before he sent it to him, reached out to us and then we took it over. And so it was shipped. And when he went to pick it up at the FedEx store, guess who was there to read it? Yes, good old FBI, right? And so he was in suburbia, right? So when we did the search warrant of his house, it was on a cul-de-sac. We shut that place down. We had all these FBI cars. We had hazmat. We had the weapons of mass destruction, and we took over this whole community. And they were out. I mean, they're standing out there, excuse me, this is so cool, right? And the only time anybody ever asked me for my own, ever, is the FBI. I'd gone out there to check on stuff, make sure everything's going okay. I was an ASAC at the time, and I'm walking back to my car. Yeah, I had the typical FBI black suit on, right? Because we only have 3 suits, black, gray, and blue, right? My white shirt, had a good hair day going. And my FBI vehicle at the time was a black tinted out Charger. And so I'm walking to my car, you got the media there, they're filming me, and you're trying to be nonchalant. And this little kid comes up to me. Can I get your autograph? Well, hell yeah, right? Yeah. So I pull out a business card, I sign it to him. And I always use that with my fellow ASACs in Chicago. I said, yeah, that's great. You're on TV, you got interviewed by so-and-so. But have you ever been asked for your interview? Right? No, that's the only time in my life I got asked for my interview. But anyway, his wife actually stood by him, right? Even though he's trying to kill it, believe it or not. So I imagine she sleeps with one eye open, right? And I'm sure if they go out to dinner and he recommends, hey, try the fish. Yeah. But anyway, so I think he got 15 years, something like that. But anyway, when we did the search of his yard and stuff, he wasn't using the toxin, but he was experimenting on guinea pigs, and we found guinea pigs buried in his backyard. Just a horrible person. Mansour Ardaxiar. This is a great case about cooperation, right? This case started in Houston from a DEA source. And the DEA shared that with the FBI. Essentially what Mansour, he's Iranian. So what Mansour, he was acting on behalf of the Iranian government. His task is to get to Georgetown, Washington, D.C. and kill the Saudi ambassador to the United States, right? And so, we got up on this right away, and he was flying from Iran to Amsterdam to Mexico City. And then he thought the source was a member of the cartel, and the cartel was going to get him across the border and get him the explosives that he needed. And so we got involved with the source, and we tried to keep as few people in Mexico in the dark about this. You can imagine, trying to work with the Mexican government on a case like this. So through our legal act down there, and I'll explain what a legal attaché guy is here in a minute, but he helped us out. And this is the honest to God truth, because we had to get a plane down there right away. On my FBI credit card, which had no credit limit, I reserved a 737, is that the little one? Yeah, 737 plane. I put an FBI agent on it and flew down and parked it in Mexico City. Because when he landed, when Ardaxiar landed in Mexico City from Amsterdam, he was going to be turned over to us. We're going to put him on that plane. We're going to bring him back to the United States for he face charges. Of course, no plane ever goes according to plan, right? So the plane goes down there, and I got my guy down there, and the Mexican authorities won't give him up. They won't even let him in the country. He's kind of like no man's land, because you don't really enter a country till you clear customs. And he was in that no man's land. And so their policy is, okay, we're not going to let him in Mexico. We're going to send him back to where he came from, to Amsterdam. In the law, or the legal, I don't want to say the law, but the airlines, if they're sending you back, you have to go back on the very next plane to your point of origin. Well, the next plane back to Amsterdam through New York, right? So they put him on a plane, he got to be, we had undercover agents on there, he got to New York, he got arrested, and found guilty, and but this was an Iranian government sanctioned hit on a Saudi national in the United States. Eric Rudolph, 1996 Olympic bombing, and also set off an ID Porsche plane in Birmingham. Yes, sir.
The Iranian guy landed in New York. Did he have to clear customs before he could arrest him?
I don't know the mechanics of it. I just know we didn't leave, you know, but we wouldn't have done it in a vacuum. We would have done it with our partners up there, the customs and immigration board, those guys. They would have been, we would have pulled them over. And what's interesting about this case, the case agent down in Houston that started this case, he and I worked together in Chicago, and he ended up getting to the Houston division, was from Texas. He couldn't work the case because it was assigned to the New York office, because the financial transaction from the Iranians to pay the DEA source went through a wire up in New York. So New York took venue, right? And it's, you know, it's a competition. New York, the largest field office, largest U.S. attorney's office. Houston, which is not a small office, but New York won it, right? And so it's a you know, that poor agent down in Houston, in case of a lifetime, and doesn't get to see it through prosecution as the case agent. Eric Rudolph, as a SWAT team member, 2 tours looking for him in the mountains of North Carolina. He was eventually found by a local police officer, I think in North Carolina, going through a dumpster several years after we were looking. He is out Supermax in Florence, Colorado right now. Life. And Mohammed Salah, Chicago resident in the suburbs. Big Hamas fundraiser. So some of the first cases that I worked on was associated with him. He actually did time in an Israeli prison. He provided a weapon to a Hamas operative that was used to kill a Israeli citizen. So he did time in a prison in Israel, sent back to the United States. So we had a case on him for a long time. We're getting ready to charge him, and he died of cancer several years ago. Jose Padilla was known as the Dirty Bomber. He's actually a Chicago gangbanger. Got radicalized, got hooked up with some people from Al Qaeda. His plan was to come to Chicago and set off a dirty bomb. Dirty bomb is like an improvised explosive device, discuss some radioactive material in it, and just, you know, it'll contaminate whatever the blast in the radius is. He was found guilty. I guess he got 17, 20 years. And then lastly, this guy, Omar Abbas. Omar was not a terrorist. He was actually a source of mine. And I was a fairly new agent then, and he was telling me that he was invited to a terrorist training camp in Dearborn, Michigan. And there was other intel out there that kind of not proved, but dovetailed what he was trying to tell us. So there was some little bit of credibility to it. And he was taking us for a ride. Omar had a gambling problem, so all the money that we were giving him to go to this camp and provide us information was all for his gambling. We got onto it, and we ended up arresting him. Anyway, so and then he was deported. And so you know, it's not nice to lie to the FBI, because that's what you got charged, lying to the FBI. Okay, counterterrorism division's role. So real quick on how the FBI is set up. FBI consists of 56 field offices. All but 3 of them are led by special agents in charge. The 3 largest, New York, Washington, D.C., and L.A., are led by assistant directors in charge, and they have SACs that work for that, right? And then I was assigned to the counterterrorism division, the largest operational division in the FBI. I was the unit chief there, as a section chief and deputy assistant director, and I was the acting director for a short while. And then we have legal attaches that are embedded in our embassies overseas, and they help facilitate international investigations. They put us in contact with our counterparts in, you know, whatever country. So we don't have any arrest power over in foreign countries. If we want to try and get somebody back, there's multiple steps you have to go through, but it all starts with the legal attaché. And let me get caught up in minutes here real quick. See, I told you I didn't need most of that. Maybe try to cover everything I want to do on this. So the difference between a traditional FBI criminal investigation and the role of headquarters versus a terrorism investigation is they are centrally, terrorism investigations are centrally managed at FBI headquarters. Certainly the most significant ones, right? And where criminal investigations are essentially managed at the field office level. And headquarters there kind of an advising program management role. Like I say, a little bit different than CTD because of the events of 9/11, right? Director Mueller, when he became director of the FBI after Louis Freeh, it was either his first day or his first week is when the events of 9/11. And then because of those, some of the intelligence failures associated with 9/11, the FBI changed, right? Terrorism was always a tier one program. But after the events of 9/11 and the reorganization of the FBI became a number one priority. So we don't have tier programs. We have priorities. Counterterrorism is number one. I'm gonna get these mixed up. Gary, help me out if I got it wrong. Counterterrorism, counterintelligence, cyber, public corruption, so right, I can't, anyway, the terrorism is the number one priority. And essentially what that means, when you're an SAC and you're in your own field office, your resources, your number one role is to dedicate the resources to counterterrorism, right? That's in your head count, in other stuff that's associated with money is you got to be able to justify that. You're gonna get graded on it. You're gonna need to inspected on it. So a little different thing about the FBI. So FBI has a intelligence role, and we have a law enforcement role, which is unique to the intelligence community, right? Where we can conduct intelligence investigations that can lead to an arrest. You mirror that to what the Canadians and the Brits do. They can their intelligence service, CSIS, Canadian Security Intelligence Service, their equivalent is CIA. They can conduct intelligence investigations, and if there's a criminal aspect to it, they can share that with the RCMP. They just don't have any arrest time, right? So the FBI is unique in that way compared to some of our partners. And the FBI is in counterterrorism investigation, the FBI is the lead law enforcement agency for the United States in the counterterrorism investigations, right? If there's a counterterrorism nexus to it, even if it starts in a criminal case, if there's a counterterrorism nexus to it, it gets turned over to the counterterrorism division. Yeah.
Maybe for an example, help me understand that the public fish killed a white guy.
Yeah.
How is that counterterrorism versus that?
So good question, Bill. And I knew I was going to get a good one from you. So you get a prize.
Oh
yeah. So domestic terrorism is still under the counterterrorism. So the pufferfish guy was actually a domestic terrorism case, right? But it's still under the counterterrorism umbrella.
Because terrorism versus murder because of the toxin.
A weapon of mass destruction because of the toxin. Yeah. So WMD, domestic terrorism, plus, I'll make it counterterrorism. If it's a good case, I'll make it counterterrorism. We're gonna run, right? So, right, Gary? Yes, sir.
FBI before 9/11, and if so, he hasn't been improved since. Thank you.
So, we're not here to talk about what you do in your private life. I mean, it's like you have a set of handcuffs. The same. So yes, right. My time at FBI headquarters, we had to work closely with our intelligence leads, CIA, NSA, and the Department of Defense, right? You don't do so much at the field level because the NSA and the CIA don't have people at the field office. the CIA has a thing, but I'm not gonna get into that. But you have to at the FBI headquarters, right? As an example, 9/11, there was some intelligence failures at 9/11. There was information the CIA didn't share with us. I'm not saying it would have prevented 9/11, but it was a piece of the puzzle, right? NSA, I mean, they are, you here last week when McCann spoke, right, in terms of their capability, this is unmatched. And then even as a CIA, I tell you, what they do, we probably never have it. But if we can get one of those guys to come here and speak about stuff, just the ability and the reach that they have is amazing, right? Internationally, they can't do any of that here. So the laws that they have to abide by are a little bit different than what you have to do in a law enforcement agency. But it's a long-winded way to say that relationship between two is extremely critical, right? We routinely share information with more of the CIA because they can take that intelligence, especially if it's a foreign individual. We don't provide information on U.S. citizens. But if you're a foreigner, we provide that to you. They take that intelligence, they operationalize it, and you can just imagine what they do, right? If you're a really, really bad dude, what's going to happen, right? Nothing good, right? Real quick operational tempo from my time back in what was going on just prior to the Boston bomb. We had Benghazi, Libya, in September of 2012. That's when Chris Stevens, the ambassador to Libya, was killed. He died of smoke inhalation, right? And then there were some other U.S. citizens, State Department individuals that were killed there on top of the roof. And they were targeted with mortars from the Libyan terrorist group. They were killed, right? And then not long after that, we had in Amenas, Algeria. It is a gas processing plant. Don't know the official title of this. Was taken over by some terrorist groups associated with Al Qaeda. And I think were like 7 to 10 U.S. citizens were killed, right? And then that's how the FBI got involved. We are sending people from FBI to these places, Benghazi, and in Amenas to Algeria. So we're getting terrorism agents and we're sending them over here to work with the authorities to conduct the investigation. And then lastly, the Boston bombing in 2013. On top of that, we had other operational disruptions. These are individuals that were planning to conduct terrorist attack in the United States. And the FBI got in front of it, took over the operation, and arrested an undercover operation. And these individuals were all disrupted, right? So these are preventions, right? It's hard to prove a negative, right? What have they really gone through? Had the FBI not got involved? We see them, they were all predisposed, right? So, we get in another undercover capacity and take over the operation and arrest. So a very, very busy time while I was back there. Now I'm back there without my family. My wife and my son are back in the Chicago area. So I'm at FBI headquarters, and because there's so much going on, I'm lucky if I got home once every 6 weeks, which is just, it was unacceptable. Fortunately, of course, I didn't know at the time, not long after Boston, the Chicago office built, SAC job opened up, and I got selected and was able to go home and retire out of it. Okay, now let's get to the Boston bombing. So why did I go to Boston, right? Because the Boston field office has a special agent in charge, right? His name is Rick Delorier. Great guy. He's a counter intel guy. As counterterrorism guys say, the counter intel guys work at speed slower than the CTD guys, right? So the counter intel guys will tell you we're a little more cerebral, a little more smarter, right? We're not the knuckle draggers. You guys go, we're going to collect the intel, right? And so the bombing happened on Monday. And I was, like I say, I was the deputy assistant director for the counterterrorism division. And what that means is I was the program manager for all international terrorism investigations in the U.S. and overseas. Program managers. I'm not the case agent, right? Those are led by the field. I'm the program manager. And like I said, they're essentially managed at FBI headquarters. So a large portfolio is what I was responsible for. And the stuff I just showed you previously, so very, very busy. So the hours I was working there. And I don't want anybody to feel sorry for me because it was all self-inflicted, right? I decided, or my wife and I decided I would go there by myself. It would have been miserable for her. Even though she's an FBI employee, it was just been miserable. You're 24/7. So every morning at 7 a.m., we brief the director of the FBI on significant terrorism investigations that are going on. And, giving him updates and everything. So I would get in to the office between 4:30 and 5, and there's always a white binder waiting for me. It was the intelligence community book. And it's stuff that happened overnight, right? And there would be intelligence products in there about terrorism from different agencies. And so I would go through that book with an analyst, and we would highlight the things that we thought the director wanted to hear, or what we wanted to tell him, but be prepared, because he was a prosecutor, right? So he would always throw you a curveball, just to see if you're on your feet, right? So that was every single morning. And that only lasted a half hour, just kind of, illustrate what the room looked like. There's a long table this way. The director sat right there. I had an analyst there, and I was here. And then the rest of the table was filled with assistant directors from different divisions. And then the seats on the outside with people from DOJ, they were there for the entertainment, right? Because many times those briefings, they go sideways fast, right? And fortunately, it never happened to me, but I've seen people get thrown out of the director's office just because he was asking questions that he knew they should have the answer to, and he didn't have. So anyway, so that morning, I'm on my way up to the morning brief, and the deputy director, guy named Sean Joyce, he steps out. He goes, "Goodbye, Bob." I go, "Sir?" He goes, "Goodbye." I go, "Okay, the meeting's been canceled because, he's concentrating on the Boston one. I have nothing to add to it." And I go, "Okay," I thought, like I said, I thought the meeting was canceled. We're good. Well, I'm going to the ninth floor, Dunkin' Donuts, get my iced tea, and I'm good for the day. What if you make it through that brief in the morning, the rest of your day is like, you got made, right? Now you still got to work, but you don't have to worry about the director asking you questions you may not have the answer to. He goes, "Get up to Boston now." I go, "Sir?" He goes, "I need you up in Boston right now." And I go, "Does Rick know I'm coming?" And he goes, "He's gonna know here in about 5 minutes." I go, "Okay," because that's a big deal. As an SAC, you have a lot of autonomy in the field office, right? You are in charge, what it's called, special agent in charge, right? And as long as you got your resources lined up, again, a lot of autonomy, you can do what you do, right? So it's a big deal from someone from headquarters to come help you with a significant investigation. I'm from headquarters, I'm here to help, right? And I really was there to help. I was there to take it over. I got sent there to shorten up the lines of communication and get resources on this problem for Rick, right? And I'll get into the reason why Rick needed help. But I don't know if I know Carmen's here, she's a teacher. Any other teachers in here? Yeah, it would be like your superintendent saying, "Hey, I'm gonna send someone from the superintendent's office to come help you with your classroom," right? Yeah, they ain't gonna go over very well. There's, St. Amateur, and this is the real deal. But I'll get into, why Rick needed, why I helped out. So just real quick on the marathon, overview, the route, it's linear, right? It goes through multiple communities within the Boston area. Very, very hard to secure, right? You can carry backpacks in there. It's changed now, obviously, since 2013, but very, very hard. And you compare that to the Chicago Marathon, which is all in the city of Chicago. It's essentially circular. And you got CPD and the Cook County Sheriff's Office providing the security instead of like 13 different police agencies helping you secure the Boston Marathon. So a very, very difficult marathon to provide security for, and you're not checking backpacks. Okay, so here comes the technology piece. Okay, so you get what happened, right? Anybody catch the time that, you heard the first one, did you hear the second one? Right, about 13 or 14 seconds apart, from the finish line, the second one, was set off by, Joe Clark. And as you see in that video, not only do you see first responders move out, use an analogy here, moving to the sounds of the guns. They're going to where the danger is, right? But you also see, people there observing or watching the marathon, people that were running, didn't get injured, running to help people, right? I'm a little bit jaded now because I've been away for a while, and smartphones, I think, what you would see now is that people videotaping or, videoing it versus help, right? I hope I'm wrong about that, but it's just, you didn't see that in the Boston Marathon, right? I got some stats here. So, April 15th, 2013, 2:49 PM is when the first device went off. 14 seconds later, about 200 meters from the finish line, the second device went off. Okay? Now, we now know who conducted the attack. It was Tamerlan, Jokar, Sarnoff, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and give you the background now, but I'll get into how we identify it. Real quick, there were 3 individuals killed by the blast. The youngest was an 8-year-old boy. There were 264 that were injured and 17 lost limbs, right? There were 2 police officers killed when the manhunt started. An MIT police officer and a Boston police officer. Boston police officer died, I think, a year later from the injuries he suffered on the shootout on April 18th. The devices, pressure cookers, right? Filled with shrapnel, BBs, nails, but they used a low explosive. They used black powder from firecrackers, and they filled up to pressure cookers. Had they used a high explosive like a C4, RDX, or dynamite, there would have been many more injuries. And the reason, I'm gonna give you some bomb tech information here. And the reason is because black powder detonates at a velocity of about 500 to 600 feet per second. C4 RDX is about 27,000 feet per second, right? You go, how does he know that? He's just making that stuff up, right? And well, I was, like I told you, I was a bomb tech. So when I went to bomb tech school, get tested, right? You do live testing, practical, and you have, paper test, right? Well, that's one of the things I had to know. What's the detonating velocity of C4, 27,600 feet per second. That's how I know. It's just useless trivia that I have up, and I have a lot of it, right? But all kidding aside, had they used a higher end explosive, there would have been many more injuries. Because the pressure cookers themselves were, they were dented up. Obviously some of the shrapnel got out because that's how people got killed and hurt. But you could still tell it was a pressure cooker. Had it been C4 or something else, we would have been picking up a lot of different pieces. So the Sarnoffs, right? Immigrated to the United States in 2002 from Tajikistan. I get that right, I think. They identify as Chechen because their father was Chechen, but they've never been to Chechnya. Tamerlan married a U.S. citizen, and she converted to Islam. The belief is that Tamerlan, the older brother, became radicalized in 2009. And there's different theories on how we got radicalized. Was it something to do with the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, or because he traveled over to the Northern Caucasus, I can't remember what country it was, and visited a mosque that, according to the Russian FSB, was associated with terrorists, right? And so initially, Tamerlan was the subject of an FBI investigation several years before the Boston bombing. And the FBI came under a lot of scrutiny and heat during the congressional testimonies after the Boston bombing on why we didn't deport him. Well, one, he was now a U.S. citizen, right? Or why wasn't he arrested? Well, the information that we got on him being associated with the terrorism group was from the Russian FSB, right? Now, Russia is not the most trustworthy country in the world, right? And they are a hard agency to work with, right? Their FSB is the equivalent of our FBI. Just they're corrupt, right? You know, and so we got this information and we opened up an investigation on Tampa. We opened up what was called a preliminary inquiry. So there's essentially 3 levels of an FBI investigation: an assessment, a preliminary investigation, and a full field. And you don't have to start and work your way through. They can start at any level. Well, he started. We had enough information to open up a preliminary inquiry, and we did all we could to confirm what the Russian FSB was telling us. And we just didn't confirm. We actually went back to Russia several times asking for additional information, and they refused to respond. Right. But we believe he could have got radicalized back if he went over. Right. And the younger brother, Joker, looked up to his brother. So he was going to do anything that his brother told him to do. So that's how he essentially got involved with the terrorist attack. So now where are you at? Okay, let me see if I can speed this up. Again, this is, the FBI is the lead, our presidential directive, but the FBI is the lead in international investigations. I shared that with you, right? So how do we identify the subjects, right? So as you can imagine, the crime scene down there at the finish line, right? A huge crime scene. There's a lot of businesses along there, and a lot of businesses have security cameras, right? So we collected it, right? And we obtained the correct, the proper legal authority to do it, but we didn't need it because they were giving it to us, right? And so we took all that information and put it all in one big server farm, and we put analysts that evening. We put analysts in a room. We want you to look at all this video, and we want you to see anything out there that is out of the ordinary, right? So essentially, as you can see on this slide, and I'll show you the video here in a second. This is how we identify, not by name, but by white hat and black hat, right? And we have some video here. So you have nonchalant.
It is never before seen video. The marathon bombers before and after the attacks, tracing their footsteps, dropping the backpacks to calmly buying milk. It is the timeline of terror. An FBI agent describing how investigators picked the 2 men out of the crowd.
It came on a very emotional day in this trial. Kate Merrill is live outside the federal courthouse tonight with the details. Kate?
Very emotional testimony, Lisa, from survivors and witnesses about that day. But it was a testimony of an FBI video expert who gave us our first video timeline of the Tsarnaev brothers on that day.
The video compiled by the FBI begins with the Tsarnaev brothers making their way down Boylston. Using several surveillance cameras, the expert on the stand Monday first shows the brothers outside of Whiskey's Steakhouse, both wearing backpacks, heading towards the finish line. It is 2:37. Tamerlan is circled in black, his brother Johar in white. But at 2:45, you see Johar stop in front of the busy Forum restaurant. That's him in the white circle wearing the white hat. At this point, they've split up, and Tamerlan has made his way closer to the finish line. That's when Johar puts his backpack on the ground right near the Richards family and the youngest victim, Martin. Johar is then seen on the phone for 19 seconds. Records show he was talking to his brother Tamerlan. Then the first bomb goes off near the finish line. When the crowd outside the Forum looks left towards the explosion, you see Johar does not and walks to the right. Suddenly, that's when the second bomb goes off, right where he had been standing. Okay.
Yeah, so that's how we identify him as
It
white.
is never before seen video. The marathon.
White hat and black hat, right? And so now we've identified, again, not by name, but we've identified, what's next, what happens? How do we find out who these individuals are? Also, while we're trying to process multiple crime scenes, right? And so that's one of the main reasons I was sent out there, to help get the assets, the division needed to do multiple crime scenes, which paid off in dividends, as you see in a minute, when I go through this slide here. Because I had to bring teams in from different field offices. pretty much every field office has an evidence response team. And our state and local partners do as well. Someone's got to lead that, right? And someone has to get that back to the lab, to have it analyzed. So what we did was, the FBI was in charge, and then, the FBI has its own Air Force. And so we were collecting evidence and we were sending it back on planes to the lab right away so we can help identify, see if we can identify who did this, right? Because obviously we didn't know at the meeting. Is this a state-sponsored terrorism attack? Is this Al Qaeda? We don't know. How many people are involved? We don't know. So the priority is to identify who did this, so we can just disrupt any additional ones. Anyway, that was great analytical work, identifying those anomalies in the video. Right? We got so much video sent to us by the public that we did our own denial of service attack, shut down our servers. Right? We didn't have enough space to keep it all. So it was just constant getting equipment out there that we needed to help identify who was who. Multiple crime scenes, right? I'm just gonna highlight a couple. So 10:30 p.m. on I forget my dates right here, April 18th is when the MIT police officer Collier was disarmed and murdered by camera. Right. It's one of those moments during that investigation. I can tell you exactly what I was doing, the exact moment that we found out. I was the FBI office where it was located then. It's a restaurant downstairs. We're getting something to eat. I was sitting with the ASAC and a couple others. And our phone, we had Blackberries, and our phones go off, and then we get the alert that there's been a police officer killed at MIT. Right? I remember also looking at one of, do you think it's related? Well, we found out shortly later it was, right. Once we identified Hamlin and Joe Carr, and then after that we had they carjacked an individual. I think he was getting gas, and they used his vehicle. He jumped out at one of the stops, and then at 8:47 p.m. is when that evening is when the shootout. There was I think it was Waterton police, I may have it wrong, identified the vehicle that they were in and tried to do a traffic stop, and the shootout occurred between Tamerlan, Jokar, the police, and they also had pipe bombs that they were throwing. And that's where Tamerlan was killed. Although Tamerlan was shot, that's not what killed him. He got killed by his brother. His brother ran over him. When we were able to interview the brother before he lawyered up, he said, I thought it was someone helping the fallen police officer. He didn't know it was his brother when he ran over. And so his brother, so Jokar, he leaves. We lose him. And then Tamerlan is at a hospital dead. And we have what's known as quick capture fingerprint. Right? It's just a little machine. We'll put your finger on it, and it goes right back to the fingerprint, the vision, and instantly we get feedback. And it was identified as Tamerlan. Okay, Tamerlan, so now we know him by name, and we know his brother Jokar by name. This is where I get into the challenges of the media. If you were here 2 weeks ago when Ken talked, we talked about media. The media can be your friend, right? They can also be a detriment to your investigation. So this slide depicts, and what you see up there on the upper left, that's Rick Delorier initially they did 2 press briefings a day, right? And so he's up there with all these individuals. I think you see Elizabeth Warren, their senator. There's even a congressman up there on stage. That Boston's not even in their district, right? They're just trying to get face time, media time. But then the lower right is what they're looking at media-wise. That's the media scrutiny over this was just intense, right? And so I'll ask a question. When could the media be helpful in this investigation here? Anybody? Anybody come take a chance?
Getting video.
Say again?
Getting video.
Video and doing what with it? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Exactly, to do what? Absolutely, to help identify the subjects, right? What's the downside of that? Nobody?
Those objects see it.
Exactly, right? So we know of 2 now. Could there be more? Right? What could those 2 do? Right? They could leave, right? So there's a lot of debate going back and forth, right? But before that, before we decided to release the video, this happened.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Rubin Report. I'm Dave Rubin, and we've got two great guests for you this week, Miss Wendy Liebman and Mr. Paul Case. And this is YouTube, so let's get right to it. Obviously, the big story of last week, and what's going to be the big story for the next couple months, is Boston terror attack and all the fallout after that. We're going to be doing the trials and just a whole mess of stuff. But I wanted to focus on the media angle here because that in a weird way became a bigger story than the actual attacks themselves. So CNN was the one that really took it on the chin, so to speak. Let's jump in and watch a little bit of their coverage.
But essentially told them we have one person to focus, that's our focus right now, we're trying to apprehend that suspect if they clearly identified, we're not told us that they.
I should say this on TV, but this is a good time when TV unfolds, maybe faster. So there's a difference between identification, which everyone can confirm now, right? Everyone is saying. So this may look very different in about an hour if we learn that there has been no arrest. But the good news is that at least there's an identification of an individual. So this is
Take it into custody without an arrest.
right. So this is all the terminology, but
And I have actually three separate sources, but two that are very highly placed and close to the investigation that have just told me that there has been no arrest. And in fact, a suspect has not been identified by name yet, that they have, they're looking for someone, but they don't have anybody in custody yet and they don't have an identification.
Okay, so we basically had 4 days of that, reporting one thing and then finding out it wasn't true an hour later. Or the big thing was, we don't want to speculate, and now we will speculate. So
Yeah, so big challenge with the media, right? Because there was nobody in custody, nobody was taken in, and so, you know, the challenge with that is you gotta take resources away to kind of, you run that down, because our executives back at FBI headquarters, and even at the White House, start watching the news, right? And then you CNN, doesn't matter which network they're listening to, they're all reporting that somebody's in custody. And so, you know, I'm getting a call and from the deputy director who's actually from Boston. And he goes, Bobby, why didn't you tell me somebody was arrested? Well, sir, I don't know if anybody's been arrested, right? Because it was wrong, right? If you remember when Ken talked last week, right? There's a race to be first, but not a race to be accurate. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. That's what happened here. We had to take resources away. Was there somebody arrested by a police department that we weren't working? So the media can be your friend. They can help you, right? They can also be a big detriment. And it's a little bit of both here. And then, you know, as I was telling you, when we put all those analysts in the room to identify white hat, black hat, and they did that, they called in and we went in. I'm talking about like Rick, the SAC, the U.S. Attorney, Ed Davis, you know, the Boston Police Commissioner, great guy to work with on that investigation. We go in and they show us the video. We're looking for these two individuals, white hat, black hat. It wasn't 30 minutes. We came out of there, it leaked, right? And the press had it. And then there's an individual, I believe it's the Bagman, it's one of those on New York Post. There was a kid that was at the marathon wearing a white hat with a backpack. And he was on the front page of the news. This is the guy we're looking for. It wasn't the guy we're looking for, right? So he called in and said, hey, that's me, but I didn't do it, right? So, I mean, it's you know, the rush to be first is it's hard. My own personal belief, you know, I don't watch the news because they're first. You know, I watch and read it because I think they're accurate, right? Or they're more balanced. But this was an investigation, it was a rush to be first versus being right.
Question,
Yes, sir.
what's your opinion so far of Cash Patel, the new guy that's running, compared to Comey?
Yeah, so I'm a bit biased, right? Majority of my career was with Director Freed and Director Mueller, right? Director Comey started as I was leaving FBI headquarters to go to Chicago, so I worked for him a couple of years. I never worked for Cash Patel. I didn't know of him until this, right? So look, you know, the Bureau is going through change right now, right? And it went through some change with Comey. Just Comey's personality was different than Director Mueller's, right? And change is not necessarily bad. As an example, when 9/11 happened, the FBI did a 1-8 and terrorism became the #1 priority. You know, well, we had to put more agents on terrorism. Where did those agents come from? It's not like the Congress says, hey, go hire 1,000 new agents. We had to take them from other programs, right? So you're seeing that kind of now, I think, with immigration. Immigration is not an FBI mission, but we have the authority to do the arrest, right? So it's, that's just kind of a long-winded way of trying to avoid any political questions, right? I don't know. I was back at FBI headquarters last week. And I have to say, how's morale? Morale's horrible. It's horrible because of the shutdown. Agents are getting paid, but the support staff's not getting paid. And they have to work. It's just not right, right? For anybody within the government. Not to have to work and not get paid, right? So it's just a bad way for me to answer your question. I'm sorry. Yeah. It's,
Question maybe a little off topic, but with all the recent firings of FBI agents, do you feel or hear that our FBI is staffed appropriately, or do we need more FBI agents?
Good question. I do have my personal views about FBI agents getting fired because of working a case, right? Not every case you work is going to lead to an arrest, right? And if you're a new agent, or if you're an agent, you're not management, your supervisor may assign you a case. And there's individuals that are being let go and getting fired because of their connectivity to January 6th, right? And I'm not here to talk about the right or the wrong, right? It's unprecedented in the Bureau, right? We'll fire agents, but you've done something pretty bad to get fired, right? And agents can mess up with the best stuff. But to get fired for doing what you're supposed to do is not right. The FBI agent-wise has stayed pretty static for the last 10, 15, 20 years, about 16,000 agents, right? There's about 30,000 employees. And it seems about to be the right mix, I guess, right? Every field office will tell you, yeah, we need more agents, right? But I think the end state is kind of where we're at is good, right? My own personal belief. So,
as the agent in charge, we find that the timelines that you're given to work with versus the perception of the public and our administration is a difficult thing to do because everybody wants everything fast today.
Right.
And how do you balance fast versus the news being first or correct?
well, that's a dang good question, right? And you're going to get that. Your question was bad. I'll give you a point. Your question is good. Can I throw it to you?
Sure. Like that.
Yeah, well, we'll find out. Nice. You gotta see me play cornhole.
I want to partner with you.
Yeah, so TV distorts it, right? I mean, it doesn't happen that fast, right? Some investigations do happen fast, right? I mean, but an intelligence investigation normally takes time. It doesn't happen in a matter of days. There's a long tail to it. Now, you may be looking for somebody, right? You open a case, you may be looking for somebody, you find them right away, you make the arrest, right? But the tail of the investigation is much longer from the arrest to prosecution to sentencing, right? It is, if you're working an intelligence investigation that's a long term, you can't give that individual, if it's a significant, you can't give them any more work, right? So you got to balance those resources. And there are times when you have to pull in from other programs within the intelligence community. TV's just kind of distorted. Yes, sir. Sleeper cells. So the most difficult type of terrorism investigation is what we call HVEs, homegrown violent extremists or lone wolves, right? They're self-radicalized, right? So that's what I would call a sleeper cell, right? They're hard to identify. And sometimes it's luck, right? A lot of times it's a good source that puts you onto it. And then with the authorities that we have to conduct investigations, you start pulling on that string, and that's how we get it. Yes, ma'am.
I
I can't believe it's been 12 years since the Boston bombing, because we were with it, so
Yeah.
it's easy to watch it. But what technology exists today that is developed in the last 12 years that would make it simple the FBI to actually find?
I think part of it really is when you see these large national events like that, it's just the security associated. It's not so much, there's technology involved with it in terms of, coming into these large venues like a marathon with your backpack where you go out and go through some screening. It's still difficult, right? But we didn't do that back in 2014. Yeah, facial recognition is, it's out there, right? There's a large false positive associated with it. So when you're in law enforcement and you're using facial recognition, you gotta be right. Right, because you're gonna deny somebody some type of, freedom of movement, liberty, that's problematic, right? So it's getting better. But the tools that agents have in terms of, like when I came in, I got issued a pager, that's it, right? But the equipment that they're giving now in terms of, their devices and, it's much quicker to share information, to get information. Keep going. Yeah.
What was the life ever charged?
She was not charged, so the question was the wife ever charged in Boston bomb? She was not. The FBI wanted her charged, felt that there was enough information there to charge her, right? But at the end of the day, it's the US attorney that makes the decision on whether to charge and indict somebody, right? So, no, she was not. Sir.
Back a bit. You were talking about your Air Force buddy who was in the Army and then went to the Air Force. And you said that he quit the old guard. Is that the same old guard that guards to the unknown?
Absolutely. If you stand up, look how tall he is. He's got to be at least 6 foot to get in there. Yeah, yes. So anyway, look, I've gone longer than I said I was gonna go. And I'll stick around and ask the questions, but I do want to get into the aftermath of what happened after Joe Carr, as we all know, Joe Carr was found in a boat, right? And so the mayor, I think it was the mayor, shut down the city, right? So people shelter in place. It wasn't an order, it was a recommendation to shelter in place. And the area that they thought where he was located, he wasn't in that area. He was one block, I think it was one block over, right? And there was a guy, he had his boat, the blue tarp in the backyard. He saw something, a jar. He went and looked at it, and this was where Joe Carr was. And then, law enforcement, just descended on this. And then, there were 200 rounds fired, and nobody knows who shot the first round, because the 200 rounds went in there. But I can tell you, there was no weapon found with Joe Carr, right? So there are no weapons coming out of the boat. They're all going in, and none of them. He may have gotten in. But that's how it ended in terms of the identifying who the bombers were. The decision when they to shelter in place, kind of a little side story here that I don't think was in the movie. I haven't read it, but it was. So when the manhunt was on, Cameron was dead. We're looking for Joe Carr. Rick Delorier was forward with his investigation team and state and local law enforcement. They had a command post set up forward. And I'm back in his office, his conference room, and I'm on a live feed with the Director Mueller, all his staff, my boss, and the Attorney General, right? So live feed, I'm giving them updates. This stuff comes in. Rick calls me, goes, Bob, we got him. We don't have him in custody, but we got him. There's 4 of them. It just got out of the cab, and there's pipe bombs all over the place. The whole mine, right? And so that was part of the reason that the city was put in a recommended for lockout. People stay home, and I report that up. And was it 2 minutes later? Hey, Bob, now it was a cab. I mean, there was a cab, but there's no pipe bombs and there's no 4 individuals. Yeah, and so it's one thing for Rick to report that to me. That's not true. Now I got to report that back up to the director and attorney general. Hey, time out. Bad reporting, right? So do not go over well. But I don't think I didn't see the movie, so I don't think that's in the movie, right? But anyway, still, we had to process all these crime scenes, need bomb text for these crime scenes. We did searches of where Tamerlan and Zhokhar lived. Later on, there were three, because Zhokhar was in college at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, I think. And his roommates saw him on TV. Well, that's what we were looking for. And they took all this stuff and they threw it in a dumpster, right? And it went to the dump. We sent investigators out and we found him, right? All three of those individuals were charged. Some of them, I think, were here on student visas, and once they completed their sentence, they were deported out of the United States. And so then the aftermath, because I want to get this to a conclusion so I can answer the question. I know you guys got to be getting bored of this. So the aftermath, the individual that you see right there is a guy named Todachev, right? Him and Tamerlan were very, very close friends. And during the course of the investigation, we went out, we interviewed Todachev. There was some intel there that led to believe that Tamerlan and him were involved in triple homicide. It was a drug deal, individuals that they knew, right? That they were going to rip them off and then kill them. And it's essentially what they did. They killed them, cut them from ear to ear, and decapitated those three guys, right? So we went just after that. We went down. Todachev was in Miami. We went down there to interview him, and he confessed. And he was in the process of writing out his confession, and he tried to assault the agent, and the agent shot and killed him, right? And then the guy at the bottom is Todachev's dad. He said essentially we murdered his son, right? We know that's not the case. Nobody was charged that was involved with that interview down there. And then what you see there, that's Ed Davis. He's was the commissioner of the Boston Police Department at the time. Great partner, right? I can remember sitting in a meeting with him when we were discussing whether we're going to release those photos, right? And there was a lot of going back and forth. Well, if we release it, they're going to be gone, or if there's others, they're going to be gone. If we do release it, maybe someone's going to call and say that's Tamerlan Sarnath, right? And so a lot of back and forth. And I remember Ed saying, look, at the end of the day, I am going to support whatever decision comes out of this meeting right here. But if we don't release this photo and there's another attack, all of us in this room are going to be, should be held responsible, right? At the end of the day, the decision was made for us. The director of the FBI was going to make the decision, not us, right? But the media made the decision for us because they called and said, hey, we know these are the guys you're looking for, white hat, black hat. Unless you tell us otherwise, if you have some compelling reason not to do it, we're going to release these photos in 30 minutes. So the decision was made to release it, right? It worked out well for us, obviously, in terms of being able to capture these guys. And other lessons learned in terms, I told you about the case we had on Tamerlan. There were some comments made that from the Boston Police Department. Had I known that Tamerlan was under investigation by the FBI 2 or 3 years earlier, our security would have been different at the Boston Marathon. And I don't believe that, right? I think it's kind of self-serving because every field office has it's called JTTF, Joint Terrorism Task Force. A Joint Terrorism Task Force is led by the FBI, but it consists of other federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies. They're given FBI credentials, they're paid for by the FBI, and they have access to all the intel that we had on our terrorism investigations. I am a little biased, obviously, right? But to be told, had we had that information, things may have been different. I don't believe it. Tamerlan and Zhokhar were committed to do what they did. In fact, their original target was July 4th, not Patriots Day. They were going to July 4th. In fact, they were on their way. After they bombed Boston, they wanted to go to New York and set up. They had pipe bombs set up that New York. So these individuals were committed, right?